Yeah, I think we can get started. So we're very happy to have here Kyle Herman, who's a research fellow at the SPRU, with Science Policy Research Unit at the University of Sussex Business School. Kyle has been working on global political economy, climate policy and innovation, and as well as industrial policy. And we're very happy to have him here to talk about the decarbonization plans of Shoreham's port. I will ask the online audience to write your questions in the chat, and they will be collected and they will be addressed by Cal at the end of the seminar. If there is a urgent matter, you can raise your hand and it will be unmuted. So I guess we can get started. Kyle, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks for having me. And it's nice to be back in Milan. I was here 7 years ago with when FEAM was still kind of connected with CMCC, and had some good time here to do the PhD research. I can't believe it's 7 years, but anyway, this project came about after two much larger projects. So we got a pretty big grant. Actually, it was 20 universities, I think, combined for industrial decarbonization research across the UK. And they have like these 5 or 6 larger clusters, which maybe 50 megatons of carbon per year, and somewhere between 20 and 30% of the total UK emissions. So we studied these 5, 6 clusters, and we had a lot of papers come out, and still some in the pipeline. Of course, I was working with Benjamin Sovacool, who kind of just prints them weekly, so that was a bit easy working alongside him. But then we went into looking at an international study. So it was like UK, Norway, United Arab Emirates, and US. So that was a year-long study, and we kind of wanted to see, okay, what are the differences, similarities between this industrial decarbonization between the countries, and what were some lessons learned. Because it was kind of, up until the Paris Agreement, it was kind of forgotten, the hard to debate industry and clusters. So this is like a cement, iron and steel, manufacturing, glass, ceramics, and other kinds of mining. So these were kind of forgotten because it was like, these are just so hard to abate. We don't have the technologies yet. But in the last like 4 or 5 years, they've become, important. So I think the UK has taken a pretty good approach here. So it's now, as you see throughout the world, like some kind of industrial policy is merging with climate policy. So in the UK's case, they've taken this industrial cluster policy, and they've set some big goals. Like one being they want to have they're going to put maybe up to 20 billion pounds into CCUS, that's carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and maybe the same amount is into hydrogen, green and blue hydrogen. So that's green hydrogen coming from renewable energy, and blue hydrogen coming from methane or natural gas. Okay, so then getting to Shoreham Port, we had these much bigger projects. Now we came all the way much smaller, and Shoreham Port is actually just outside the University of Sussex. It's about 10-15 minutes by train. It's there are about 23 firms, industrial firms there. And they're operating in cement and in steel and in recycling biofuels. Also, they have natural gas, electricity plant there. So even though it's small, they have like a diverse group of industrial players. And then they have as well 175 tenants. So these can be like any kind of company, but these are small, medium-sized enterprises. So they're all part of this Shoreham Port industrial cluster. So it's a year-long project, and what happened was, like University of Sussex, we got together with the Shoreham Port, And we applied for this grant, and we got it. So it's the local industrial decarbonization plans competition. And there were 9 others, so 9 other LIDP winners around the UK. So this is like the UK government is giving a grant to try to, at the end of the year, come with a decarbonization plan. And the plan should not be so lofty and ambitious, but it should be actionable. Meaning, okay, so in 2025 they want to do this project, 2026 this project, and this is how. In our case, we're going to get to net zero by 2035. So that's the goal actually of Shoreham Port, and they had already made that goal before we applied. So it's quite ambitious, because if you think that's just a decade away. Yeah. So this is just a presentation outline. And if there are any questions so far, any of the prior projects or this current project, just go ahead and raise your hand online or here. So just to give a bit about the project background, then the research plan, some discussion and conclusion, and hoping to have a nice rich discussion, because actually we're almost at the midpoint of this project. So as it were, we are somehow in the middle here. If this were a research paper, right? We're kind of in the middle of data collection, and maybe by end of June we will have gone through the data and start to really write the papers. So that being said, it'd be nice to have a discussion, get some more ideas, and you can kind of weigh in on this research. Okay, so as I might have mentioned, it's pretty important, these industrial regions and clusters. A lot of people, over 1.5 million people across these energy intensive industries, and quite a lot of goods and services, 320 billion. But at the same time, a lot of emissions. So I don't think the UK is alone in this respect. I think pretty much all G20 countries have this sort of problem, that the industrial clusters or industrial regions produce a lot of goods and services, and a lot for the economy, and as well government derives a lot of tax revenue from these industrial regions, but really heavy in emissions. Yes, one question.
What share, because I'm not an UK expert, what share of the population is 1.5 million, and what share of total emissions is 32 metric tons? Do you have any intuition for those two?
Okay, so these statistics are from the 5 or 6 large industrial clusters. So this is like in the south of Scotland, and then in Liverpool, Merseyside, Teesside, the Humberside, and Southampton and South Wales.
And there's like 5% of workers in the country, 10%, 20%.
Oh, I think on the top of my head is 45 million people in UK.
45 million people,
something like that.
30 million workers. So we're talking about 5% of all workers in the country.
It's quite a lot, huh? Yeah.
And in terms of emissions, these 32 metric tons, what percentage of total emissions in the UK? Do you have an intuition for that?
There was kind of varied. Like they have some 20 up to 35%.
Okay.
But this is megatons.
Yeah, and they and this is the largest 6 industrial clusters. When they add these dispersed sites of like Shoreham Port, it's going up higher. So
like 5% of workers in the UK are working in industries that produce 20% of the emissions in the country.
Yeah,
I see.
or higher. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So in some quite a few other G20 countries, you have this similar problem, and it's not just. The thing is that these that what these industrial sectors produce is needed even for renewable energy, you know, and of course airplanes, of course for buildings, skyscrapers, construction industry, all this. And we haven't yet got the technology to overcome the emissions. There's some experimentation with green cement and green steel making, all this, but it's not going too well as of yet. I mean, there have not been so many breakthroughs, which is why they've come with this idea to use CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. It's not a new idea. Of course, Norway and the US are kind of world leaders in that regard, but much different because in Norway, you have the government giving funds for almost 3 decades to build this out, the carbon capture. And in US, it's kind of almost the market has determined that it's profitable because they use it like 75% for enhanced oil recovery. So it's making sense there. For UK, this is entirely novel, CCUS, and it's not been done at any scale yet. But we'll come back around to that in a bit. So just to sort of reiterate the drive for this industrial sort of, we'll say green industrial policy, or some say, you know, industrial climate policy, try to revive these regions. So I think maybe the UK experts won't really know, but in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher, these same industrial regions kind of got left behind. They got privatized. A lot of jobs were lost, and a lot of industry was lost. So now it's a little bit scary because 40 years later, it seems like, at least from the perspective of the industrial cluster workers, we've spoken to a lot of them, they feel like something similar is about to happen. Like the central government is coming with this new policy and they're going to just change everything overnight and they're going to lose their jobs. And yeah, it's already happening in South Wales because they, in South Wales, they say, no, they must change to green steel making by this certain date. And Tata, which is an Indian company, is saying like, yeah, you have to give us £1 billion or we're not going to do it. And I think the UK government say, I will give you 300 million. And so they say, no, we're just going to shut down the plant. And so 3,000 workers won't have a job. So it's kind of a standoff right now. So yeah, it's really salient, politically speaking. So it's not just the industrial policy, it's really like a political situation which has some echoes in the past. So I just like kind of we start to write the paper, and we hopefully will come with several articles, but we're aiming for, I don't know if there's a lot of quantitative researchers here, I know, but we're going to aim for organization science, which is like a pretty tough 4-star journal. So if anyone knows how to get in that, it'd be interesting. Yeah, because it's really hard there, but that's what we're aiming for, if not organization studies. But this the working abstract. Any questions again so far? Yeah.
I have it's just a definition question. So how do you define industrial cluster? Is just a company or is a couple of companies in the same place? Like, I guess the territory is part of the key, but then how many companies are involved? How many people are involved in a cluster?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So for the large clusters, like the UK government defined them. So they said these are actually the top 7. They had 7. Also, Black Country is one of them. And they didn't define the geographical area, but they said this is where they're located, and these 7 clusters must now compete to get funding. For Shoreham Port, I mean, it is a port cluster traditionally defined, but once the grant was gotten, we had to actually draw on a map like this is our cluster. And because the electricity power station is technically like not under the authority of the Shoreham port, like we excluded them, which made things a bit easier for for the reduction of carbon, because that was like the main carbon reduction. We didn't do it for that reason, but like because they were not under the remit of the Shoreham port authority, which is, I'll get to that in a minute. The Shoreham port is a trust port, so there's a couple, yeah. And then there was a related question, or no, that was yeah. There was, so about the clusters. Yeah, I mean, I'll maybe come back to it at the end, but it's kind of defining the industrial cluster, and then as well, also the application of theory to this is also like really complex, because you have like Michael Porter's cluster theory, and then you have like more regional innovation systems like Iammarino cluster theory, and these are kind of competing in a lot of ways. So we can talk at the end about that, but we have an article in General Economic Geography that like is discussing all these things about the larger clusters. So I think I already mentioned, yeah, but just going to the Shoreham as a trust port. So in UK, actually, like I think maybe all of, or just about all of the ports are privately owned. Some of them are owned by like the Association of British Ports. They own like quite a lot of them. And then there's this other thing called like a trust port. So I don't know the exact number, but at least I think maybe like 40 or 50 are trust ports. It's kind of like a B corporation. So all of the proceeds are given back in. So they don't, it's kind of like a non-for-profit. And it's actually been set up that way for over 250 years. So it's been a trust port for that long. So for pretty much everything they do, they have to sort of consider around them, you know, how it impacts the city and the local residents and all of that. And so in this setting, that's pretty good. So in the net zero goal, it's all like working with, you know, their remit as a trust port. So that's it. On that, it's not so clear, but I can just describe a little bit. So the University of Sussex will be up here somewhere. And so it's actually pretty interesting, or maybe I'll just make it interesting because it's our current research. But anyway, it was like there was a river here like for thousands of years, and it was coming down and pushing. And then one of the princes like 500 years ago say, yeah, this could be a nice port. So then they closed up the river mouth, and then they put a lock here. So you can bring really heavy ships in here. It's quite deep. So for example, Cemex has a plant there, a big cement, you know, global cement producer. Barrett Steel, another pretty big one. Tarmac, some really big multinational firms. They can bring their big ships in there, and then they can also come along the sea. So it's outside Brighton and Hove, which is really the most southern part of England. And they can come on the sea, and they can unload, or they can fuel, or whatever they need to do on both sides. So it makes it pretty unique. But this is not that large. This is like maybe it's like 1.5 kilometers, and then this is like, you know, half a kilometer. So
in terms of cargo, is it like top?
Yeah.
Like top 10 largest of the largest ports in the UK, top 5, top 3, top what?
It's I don't know. I have it written inside the draft paper, but it's not. It's top 20. Yeah.
Top 20.
Yeah.
Not of the largest.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not bringing in a lot. Yeah, every year. So Southampton is quite close, and that is like, if not the largest, second largest.
Okay.
So it's kind of like specialty type industry. Like, so the Cemex, for example, of the plant there, Cemex, because they're like, they take sand from the seabed and then they just make their cement right there. It works pretty well. Barrett Steel's operations there, they do like quite a bit of recycling. So wherever they grab it from Scandinavia, wherever they grab it from Europe, and it's a good location in terms of, you know, right across is France, not too far from Rotterdam, then Southampton. So they do like quite a bit of like import export. And yeah, a lot of different kinds of kind of niche industrial sector operations, you might say. But yeah, I think there is another photo later, but if you cannot really see that there's a huge solar array here, and then there's quite a lot of solar installed already, which we'll get to in the next slide. But yeah,
I think 300,000 is very little, no, for a port. I mean, what do you pay with that?
yeah, it's very little.
Yeah, I don't know what you can do with 300,000.
Yeah, well, okay, so this is a good point. So this is, okay, the 300K, this is for the plan. So this is for like this year's research, right? So that's like, so that's between University of Sussex and Shoreham Port. And they've got, so we have myself, and then there are 2 other professors, but working like on a small part-time. And then Shoreham Port has like 1 person dedicated to this. So that's kind of the researcher's salary and their person's salary and like some overhead and yeah. But it's a good point because yeah, as the large industrial clusters, that was not really the plan. Like government was already putting money into the projects, so that's what it was like billions of pounds or 300 million K, because I mean 300 million pounds. Because they're actually financing the projects, like.
So the decarbonization is not self-funded, but comes from the government.
Yeah, well, they're supposed to match industry, like not 1-to-1, but something like that. So the idea of this Shoreham Port Authority LIDP is at the end of this year, we have a nice shiny plan. And then we go back to government and, you know, ask for like bigger money, you know, 2 million, 10 million, something like that. And go to private sector as well. So that's the idea that they're trying to set up, because they're running it like they did 4 years ago for the bigger clusters. That's how they did it. The bigger clusters made these plans, then they went back to government, said this is what we got, and they went to industry, and they kind of grouped up to do it. Yeah, so just pointing out so this is kind of what they've really got, like towards their net zero. Don't hold me to these numbers. This is taken from Shoreham Port Authority. We're actually doing a techno-economic analysis right now to kind of revise everything, make sure it's right. But that was just taken from their sustainability report, which some are not so good. It's the sustainability reports that is. Yeah, so this was pretty interesting what they did with solar. Actually, there's something called a Brighton Energy Co-op. And like they do in Denmark for decades now, like with wind, they have, what they do is they take like public spaces or they rent like spaces. And in this case, they went to Shoreham Port, the Brighton Energy Co-op. They said, okay, you have a lot of roof space that we want to put our solar. And the benefit is we're going to give you like a really reduced price for that solar energy. Showing ports are great. It looks good because our sustainability plans. Let's do it. And then Brighton Co-op went out to the market, and I think within just like a month, they were able to sell like that investment, right? So I don't know what they told me, but over 150 or 180 different investors. You know, so all these different investors, they say, we're putting this array there. You can invest if you want. You're going to get paid back over this timeline. And so that's kind of, yeah, how these energy co-ops work. It's like a collective. So they're able to like expand up quite a bit, I would say. There's solar by doing that. And just one more point, why they stopped expanding, because there's like a technological bottleneck. So if they had a closed loop system, and I'm not an engineer by any means, but if they had some closed loop system, they could keep expanding out. But since they're still connected to the grid, they've maximized the solar. And then they've got these two sort of vintage wind turbines, which is pretty cool. But they're maybe over 20 years old now, so not really doing that much. But importantly, like there's this lock where every time a ship comes in and out, they have to use a lot of energy to get the water levels, keep the water level the same. So those two turbines actually run the lock. So yeah, so that's nice. And then they installed some marine source heat pump. And they've changed these forklifts from diesel to gas to liquid fuel, reducing local air pollutants, which is actually quite important because, as you can kind of see here, like this city is right there. So all of these people, they live literally less than half a kilometer from the industrial port. Yeah, and just to point out that the forklifts, so you think industrial clusters, you think, okay, so when they're making cement or making steel, that's the emissions. Then you forget about all of these vessels involved. So we have these forklifts, you have also just vans and trucks and lorries, and yeah, and then in ports, you as well have ships, like they have Shoreham Port Authority owns 3 ships and they run them on diesel. You have to do all these things. So yeah, so it's not just these big industrial operations that have to be decarbonized, but also these smaller minutiae. So as I mentioned, and I should have mentioned at the top if I didn't already, this is like, we're kind of almost halfway through the project, so not really bringing forward the findings yet, because yeah, we're still collecting data and all that, which I'll explain next. But we can come back to hopefully some ideas after. So this we just we used like this open source. I forget what it is exactly. I can look it up later if someone has questions. But you kind of just plug this into a spreadsheet, and then you connect. These are all the firms and all the actors involved in the Shoreham Port industrial decarbonization. So if it's like if they're an industrial player, like it'll be in a certain color, and then if they're just like a regular tenant, it'll be, you know, in the blue, and so forth. So it kind of like just automatically does this this link node analysis, and you can play around with it a bit. You can add the weights and yeah.
So right now, this project is between the port and the university, but like the private actors, for example, Cemex, they're not involved in the project, or are they involved in the project also?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I can't speak like on the record completely about, because they are one of the industrial partners, and there are actually 7 industrial partners. And that being said, I would say it's mainly University of Sussex and Shoreham Port Authority that are really like spearheading everything so far.
So the net zero will be for the port operations, but not for the Cemex plant.
It gets, yeah, a little more complicated. No, they want Cemex operations to go net zero as well.
I see.
And within this decarbonization plan, there are 7 industrial partners that are part of the plan, but they've really just come and sat at the table so far. So they haven't even like asked much. So so that kind of, yeah, a little bit difficult. But yeah, this is just like I wouldn't say like research output. This is just kind of like for us to understand what is going on there. Yeah, maybe we do something with it, or maybe we don't. But now I'm just gonna get to. Well, first I'll just go quickly through the kind of the theoretical framework that we're using and applying, and then I'll get into the data, and I think it'll answer a few more questions with respect to yeah, what's going on with these industrial partners. So there's something called like ecosystems and ecosystem innovation. So it relates a little bit to like regional innovation systems, and then I would say also it kind of overlaps a little bit with this new kind of mission innovation and what Maria Mazzucato is doing on grand challenges and so forth. So we thought this made sense here at the moment, since going back to what we discussed before, like this cluster theory is like really complex and perhaps not the best to apply here, and which one do you use and so forth. So we're applying this ecosystems and eco-innovation system. And then as well, we're applying this orchestration and orchestrating actors. Since in this case, you have Shoreham Port Authority, you have these industrial partners, then you have the government funds. So you have all these different pieces that have to come together, and the roles and responsibilities, even in the past 6 months, have changed a lot. And so this is another kind of good way to understand it. It's been widely applied in project management literature, especially what do they say? Mega projects, which are over £1 billion or euros. This is a mega project. So we thought it's pretty fitting. And then Andy Davies is who I'm directly working under right now. So he's done a lot of work in this area. So and this is the data. So we have 3, or 4 pieces of data. I just showed the actor network. That's to be determined. Do we include that? Like I said, just good to get an idea what's going on. And then this techno-economic analysis, which I mentioned already, and that's actually been not by us, been outsourced to a consulting firm, Ricardo, which is nice, makes my job a bit easier. But then we have these surveys. So we have 2 separate surveys. One is going to the industrial tenants, so the 23 industrial tenants. And that's asking like a lot of complex knowledge about their energy, their emissions, blah, blah, everything they spend on investments. And then the other survey to the 175 tenants, which is just kind of more generic. Okay, do you know what's going on here? Decarbonization plan, you're interested in what's going on, blah, blah, blah.
What is a tenant?
Oh, sorry. So the tenant is like here, CMCC is a tenant of this building, like.
So renters in the port.
Yeah.
Who rents
So
space?
it can be any kind of company, but they're small, like from 2 to 20 employees they have, all like small companies.
And it's mostly like costumes, services.
It's actually, you would say like, you would think that you're going to be related to the port, but you say like maybe like 60% are not related to the port at all. They're just there because it's a nice space and they want to be near the sea.
Okay, I think.
Yeah, and then the rest say, oh, it's good to be, connected to the port because we do something like that.
Maybe a couple of civilians there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's actually a pretty good rent for Brighton. It's very low rent for what you get, new buildings. Yeah. So those have gone out a few weeks ago, the surveys, and they're mostly qualitative. It's a few components of quantitative, trying to quantify the emissions. And then these semi-structured interviews, which now we've done close to 30 already, and in the next week or so, we try to get up to 50. So then once we collect that, so let's say in a month we have all the data then. And then there's a couple things to transform the data. So for the interviews, like they're transcribed obviously, and then we use some natural language processing. So this is, I don't know if anyone's aware of NVIDIA, I forget what it's called, but we're using a WordStat, Provalis WordStat. So what it does is it puts them all in the machine, and then it pulls out like the key themes and the keywords, and then it does some sorts of analysis. Anyway, it just makes these 50 interviews, which are between 35 and minutes and 1 hour. It makes it a bit easier to see what's going on all without having, to do a PhD dissertation again, like read through it for 6 months. So makes it a bit easier. And yeah, then we might do some actor network analysis. This is still pending. And Ricardo is doing a techno-economic predictive analysis. And then essentially bringing all this together to make first the decarbonization plan, and then explain what's going on right now and what is not predictive, but what do we expect are the trajectories of this board with respect to its net zero plan. So sometime end of the summer, we synthesize all the research and then we present it back to the government. So that's when there's a conference. There are 4 conferences a year. We just had one, and so this will be the big one. They want to see, okay, this project is moving at speed. And so out of the decarbonization plan, what the government really want to know is what are some public and private investment opportunities. Where, to take an example, is it possible to electrify the port, so when the vessels pull up, they don't have to run their diesel 24 hours? Are there other opportunities to expand shore renewable energy, close onshore wind turbines, or more heat pumps, etc.? And then how much does that cost? Is that £1 million? Is that 20 million pounds? Realistic, what is the cost, and then what is the timeline? So yeah, that's really where we are right now. And just interested to hear questions and some comments, and don't feel bad about saying anything. I mean, this is ongoing research, so it's not like it's published and I can stand behind it. It's all a work in progress. So that's it. Yeah.
I was wondering 2 things. First, what is the likelihood that you arrive to the government and say, this is our plan, it's going to be 15 million pounds, and the government says, like, no? Is that possible, or is this pretty much a sure thing already?
Yeah, it is definitely really possible, like entirely possible, because, well, now we're getting into politics, but UK is now looking like it's going to change over to another side. And as well, you might have seen, like, they just rolled back a few different climate-related policies. They were going to have no more petrol cars in 2030. Now they put to 2035. And then they scrapped like this mega project for the rail, which is not really a climate project, but you can say would, over the long run, save a lot of emissions because people are taking the rail instead of. So it's a bit risky. And I think that's the idea, to make different trajectories. So what we're going to say, like, we can do these 20 mini projects that are 200K each, and they might be good, or we can do a few mini projects and 2 massive projects. The massive ones will cost 20 million, like maybe converting the Barrett steel to green steel. Like, this is going to be a big one. So, and then some of the argument there as well is like, it's really right within next to the residential area. So the low-hanging fruit in this instance is not really carbon emission reduction, it's reduction of local air pollutants. So in this sense, we think we can also have like another trajectory that says, look, this is not technically like reducing the carbon, but reducing particulate matter, reducing NOx, and this is good for the local residents and for the city council and everything else. So like sort of this low-hanging fruit and building a win-win for. Yeah.
Did you already evaluated if air pollution is actually high enough to be a relevant factor for the health of the people living nearby?
Yeah, in fact, some strange things about the UK, but some good things as well. Like they have pretty good like micro level data on emissions and local air pollutants. So this is a hotspot in Brighton and Hove. Like this is the one main hotspot in the city, which is not a particularly big city, but yeah. So there's definitely low hanging fruit there. Yeah. Any questions online?
Do you have any expectations about could be the implications for jobs in terms of job creation, job destruction, quality of jobs of the decarbonization process?
Yeah, it's a really good question too. And this is, we're actually writing, it's not so far along, but we're writing about a separate grant for this question of jobs and industrial restructuring. So there's for the largest industrial clusters, there was a lot of talk about, we'll go back to CCUS now. There was a lot of talk about CCUS and new hydrogen are going to create and maintain these many thousands of jobs. So for Teesside, which is like pretty heavy industrial sector, a bit more confined, but they would say it's 3,500 jobs for CCUS, building it out. And then they said more longer term, maybe it's just going to be 500, 600. If you look at actually when Teesside was producing tons of chemicals, they had all these different chemical companies that actually came under one company at the end. It was many, I think 19,000 or something jobs. And then there's still a bit more debate about like CCUS. So what are these 600 permanent jobs, right? Is it just operation and maintenance? Yeah, it could be. Now going to the hydrogen economy is a bit more rosy, the predictions, because there's still a lot of unknowns out there and there's still a lot of experimentation. And of course, hydrogen is actually just like an energy carrier. So there might be 100,000 jobs because they're working to bring hydrogen from here to there, here to another. So what you might have in this future hydrogen-based economy is tons of jobs in just bringing hydrogen around at different, what they're called dispersed sites. But that being said, coming back to the jobs question, all of these lofty predictions for the jobs, they either come from central government or big industry. So big industry is really behind the push for CCUS or the hope for hydrogen, especially blue. Okay, why? Because it just pretty much enables them to continue doing as they're doing. Of course, people say, oh, but they have to put up all this money to build out the CCUS or hydrogen. Well, no, they're waiting first for the government to hand them the money, and then they're gonna probably slowly start to do things as what's happening right now in Teesside. So the big risk for the UK is that they've not had a industrial scale capture. So they're planning to put it in the North Sea, and all the research says it should be fine, but they've just not done it yet. So they've got like 20 billion pounds waiting to build out these pipelines and try to do this, but they haven't started to do it yet. So it could be that they build it out and then it doesn't work, or that government policy completely flip-flops, or yeah, and then it's a big waste of taxpayer money. But yeah, for Shoreham Port Industrial Cluster, the jobs, we're estimating it's gonna be just dependent on each project by project. So with each, I mean, if it's a smaller project, we say, yeah, there could be this many. We're just gonna estimate temporary and permanent. But it's really anyone's guess.
I'm not sure if you've already mentioned this, but how does Shoreham?
I guess Shoreham, yeah.
Uh,
Shoreham. The H is like silent, yeah. Yeah.
How does it compare with other ports, even across the different types? How far ahead or behind or?
In terms of like sustainability, climate.
Yeah, how they do?
It's actually pretty far ahead, even though it doesn't even seem like a lot, but it's pretty far ahead of the other smaller industrial clusters. But it is quite small, and they're a trust board. So the trust board is kind of really geared well towards this operation, because it's like within their what do you call, like their mission statement, that they must like reinvest, and reinvest in this sense also means reinvest in a kind of environmentally conscious way.
Brighton is also more.
Brighton's pretty progressive city, like the Brighton and Hove Council was like really far ahead in EV charging and so forth. And I should have mentioned, the council is working on this project with us too. They're just kind of like at the table, but they're trying to be active. They want to get involved. So they have their own decarbonization plan, and we try to make some synergies there. But yeah, I mean, it's what we think at the moment. It can be like a really nice template for how to do it. And it might not be applicable to these really large industrial clusters like in South Wales, for example. But maybe for other smaller clusters, not just ports in the UK and elsewhere. Because there are actually tons and tons and tons of these small industrial clusters. You know, and there are obviously more of them than there are large ones. And I think I might have mentioned, but maybe not, these small clusters or small dispersed sites, if you add all the emissions up in the UK of these ones, it's more than the 5 large ones. So the 5 large ones a lot, but the smaller ones actually makes up more emissions. So yeah, so these are a lot of challenges, because it's all first of a kind technologies and processes and contracts and funding and all of that. And then each one is like really unique. So yeah.
Okay, so we have no questions online. Thanks a lot, Kyle, for the talk. Yeah, thank you to the participants online who followed the seminar.